Hey guys, welcome to the Nexoel Trading Hub YouTube channel. So in this particular video, we're going to have a review of our last week Forex forecast to look at how actually price delivered based on our analysis. So you can see this is the dollar index, the weekly time frame. You can see we identify this candle as the candle that actually swept this sell side liquidity, and then we see the push of price to the upside into this weekly implied fair value gap. So now what we're expecting is to actually see price fall into this breakout low, because this is actually the buy move that sponsored the sell move to the downside that took out this sell side liquidity. So we anticipated to see price return to retest this level, which is actually in confluence with this other block zone. And then we now see the push of price to the upside, because we're anticipating to see price come to raid this buy side liquidity. And then you can see that price actually delivered just the way we anticipated. Return to the breaker, and then we have the bullish move to the upside. Let's go to the daily time frame. Now you can see in the daily time frame, what we identified was actually, this is the weekly breaker zone. Price fell to the downside, swept the weekly sell side liquidity, and then we have the push of price to the upside. And then we have this return of price to come fill up this displacement, this price inefficiency, the fair value gap resting here. So we identified this as actually an order flow where we anticipate to see price return further into the downside to come mitigate the weekly breakout block, and then we see price push to the upside. And that is what we can see happened here. So let's drop to the 4-hour time frame. Now you can see price neatly delivered to the upside. What we saw actually in the 4-hour time frame is actually this. We saw this particular candle swept the low of this candle. Now we have price pushed to the upside and then broke through this swing high points. So we identified this as a breakout block zone because this was the move that took out the swing high. So we identified this in confluence to this particular fair value gap here, and also the fair value gap resting here. So we identified this fair value gap in confluence to this fair value gap, which will become an inverted fair value gap, and also the breaker for price to come push to the downside, mitigate, and then we have the push of price to the upside. And then you can see it was in confluence with the breakout block zone, where we identified this on the 1-hour time frame as relatively equal lows for price to sweep before we have the push of price to the upside. And that is what we can see was neatly delivered in this particular price action. So guys, this is what we identify in the dollar index. And then you can see how price neatly delivered to the upside. So guys, let's check the other pair that we actually analyzed, and then we had our forecast on what we anticipated price to actually do. So let's go to the GBPUSD pair. So this is actually our GBPUSD pair. So let's have a review of the GBPUSD pair. So what we actually identify in the GBPUSD pair is that we had this sweep of this buy side liquidity, and then we also had this candle swept this buy side liquidity resting here. This particular weekly candle projected to the upside and swept this candle's week high, and then this candle's week high point too. So we have the gap of buy side liquidity, and then we saw that price fell to the downside and then closed below the previous week candle. So we expected to see that price push to the upside, mitigates this particular week in confluence to this particular block here. And then we would see the fall of price to this fair value gap resting here. So where we actually identified this fair value gap and then actually left this zone here is in confluence with this order block. Because you can see we have the push of price to the downside and then price pullback and then fell to the downside. Then we have this buy move to the upside before the sell move that swept this low points. So we have the fair value gap left here. So anticipating that price will return, mitigate the fair value gap and fall to the downside. What you can see is the price projected to the upside. Now what we expected is to see price return, and then this candle should reclaim price at this particular zone in confluence with this fair value gap. And that is what you can see neatly happen here. We have the buy, and then before we have the fall to the downside, and then straight to the zone we marked out as where we want to see price face a reaction. So let's drop to the daily time frame. Now here in the daily time frame, you can see we saw this particular sweep of this high points here in the daily time frame, and then price fell to the downside. Price left this inefficiency here. So we anticipated to see the reaction of price to the upside to come fill up this fair value gap in confluence with this particular block actually. And then we now saw price actually delivered that. And then you see we have the fall of price to the downside into that zone. You can also see in the daily time frame, we have it as the fair value gap. So let's drop to the 4-hour time frame so that you can also see what we actually anticipated. Now you can see in the 4-hour time frame, since we are anticipating a buy move to the upside, so we had this buy movements to the upside to this particular breakout block zone, because this is the breakout block, this is the block that sponsored the move to the upside that took out to this high, and then price fell and then took out the breakout block. So we anticipated to take profit at this level, and then we want to see our sell entry also drop to the downside. So we saw our buy movement to the upside for price to come fill up this fair value gap, this price inefficiency, and then we will see the fall of price to the downside. And you can see that was neatly delivered. You can see the sniper entry in our GBPUSD pair. So guys, let's now go to the EURUSD pair, though the EURUSD pair was not activated. So let's have a review of the EURUSD pair also. So this is actually our EURUSD pair, the weekly time frame. So what we saw in the weekly time frame is that we saw price push to the outside to cut this buy side liquidity. Price to cut the buy side liquidity of this candles, and then we see price fell to the downside into this inverted fair value gap here. So what we can see is that price mitigated the 50% of this particular week here, and then what we anticipated was to see if price open, want to see the return of price to come fill up this price imbalance, want to see the reaction at this particular order block zone, because this is the sell move before the buy move to the upside that took out the buy side liquidity. Our anticipation is to see price push to the downside to come raid the sell side liquidity. So you can see price neatly delivered, return, retested this particular sponsorship candle, and then you can see price now fell to the downside, closing below this inverted fair value gap. So guys, let's check the daily time frame. Now here in the daily time frame, you can see we have price to cut the buy side liquidity, we have the fall of price to the downside. Now in confluence to that particular order block we marked in the weekly time frame, you can see we now have this order flow, because price fell to the downside, return, fill up this inefficiency, and then price fell to the downside. So we expected to see price react at this zone, return, mitigate this order flow zone, and then price falls to the downside. So we are anticipating to see price raid this sell side liquidity, and furthermore the possibility of price raiding this sell side liquidity. So let's drop to the 4-hour time frame. So here we are in the 4-hour time frame. You can see this was the buy move we anticipated, but then we were not activated into the sell move. You can see price left us. So price just reacted at that particular, price only reacted at that particular order block zone we marked in the weekly time frame. You can see the reaction there, and then price fell to the downside, which in the 4-hour time frame I marked out in confluence with this breakout block, because you can see we have the pullback, price fell to the downside, took out this low point, and then price pushed and broke, violated this order block. So I was anticipating to see price reclaim this order block, reclaim price, and then falls to the downside. But then I was further looking at price possibly filling up this inefficiency here. That's why the entry was here, but then price did not return to the entry, and then we see price falls to the downside. So I'm just giving us a recap, a review. I'm not going to furthermore break down price to the 15-minute time frame to look at how would have possibly taken entry. No, I'm just showing you guys what happened. So this is what happened actually with the EURUSD. So let's check the gold pair. So this is actually our gold pair, and this is the weekly time frame. Now what you can see, we have the sweep of buy side liquidity, and then this candle actually swept the previous week candle high points, and then you can see now we have this giving us a bullish momentum. So what we anticipated is to see price return to the upside furthermore before we can see price aiming for the downside to come take out the sell side liquidity. So let's drop to the daily time frame. So what we saw in the daily time frame is that we saw price take out the buy side liquidity. We have this breakout block here, this sell move before the buy move that took out this high points. So we can see price return mitigated. We have the gap of liquidity here. So we anticipated to see price return to fill this inefficiency that was left here, for price to mitigate this order block, and then we can now see price falling to the downside to come raid this sell side liquidity resting below this zone here. So this is what we actually projected for the gold pair. So when we drop to the 4-hour time frame, we're going to see what we actually saw and then how we're expecting price to deliver. Now you can see from the 4-hour time frame, when this analysis was conducted, we saw price reacting here. So we expected to see price return into this breaker zone, because this is the sell move, as also the buy move that took out this high point. And then you can see it's in confluence with this fair value gap. We have this massive displacement. So we anticipated to see price return to the breaker, and then we anticipate the fall of price to the downside. And that is what you can see actually played out in this gold USD pair. So guys, this was actually what we analyzed last week. We made a forecast of in the YouTube channel. And now this is how all of these things played out. So we are also going to check the USDJPY pair. So guys, this is actually our USDJPY pair. So what we saw is we saw the sweep of this sell side liquidity. So we're anticipating to see buy side liquidity raid. So that was what we were actually anticipating to see in the weekly time frame. So let's drop to the daily time frame. So now you can see in the daily time frame, so we're anticipating to see price raid the buy side liquidity. But what we're actually looking out for is to see first price mitigate this candle and return to this level before we further see the push of price to the upside. But anyway, USDJPY continued the bullish momentum to the upside. Let's drop to the 4-hour time frame. So this was what we're anticipating to see in the 4-hour time frame. I think price was still within this level. So we're anticipating to see price fall to this level because of this fair value gap, before we now see price continue the movement to the upside to come raid this buy side liquidity. But that didn't happen. We just saw price further push to the upside, given the bullish momentum. So guys, this is all about last week's review. So anticipate the coming weekly Forex forecast for this coming week. So cheers guys, and God bless you.